Good day, everyone. Today, I will present to you my critic paper entitled Unveiling the Internal Structure of Literary Text, a New Critical Analysis of a Henry's The Gift of the Magi. Before that, let us also know the abstract. So, this study applies new criticism under formalist approach to analyze O. Henry's short story, The Gift of the Magi, and through close reading, of diction, imagery, symbolism, irony, paradox, and narrative tone, this study uncover how a text construct meaning independently without relying on the external context or historical context. And the analysis reveals that symmetrical or balanced plot, emotionally charged language, and symbolic interplay of Della's hair and James' watch generate paradoxical resolution in which a person's loss or loss of belonging becomes the way for a strong bond that both characters have. And the effects of the ironies and use of paradox elevated the whole content or the narrative into universal meditation on love and sacrifice, while the narrator's soft tone bends the harshness of irony, leading readers towards empathy rather than pity. And also, ultimately, this paper demonstrates that literary devices and internal structure could create artistic unity, transforming the story into a timeless reflection on devotion, wisdom, and selfishness. And the use of keywords are paradox, irony, new criticism, formalist approach, narrative devices, and universal unity. For the introduction, since the publication of the Magi, the Gift of the Magi in 1905, it is a classic American short story known for irony and tight narrative designs and elements. In which it tells a story of a poor but devoted spouses, Jim and Dallas, whose stories gains meaning through formal elements rather than the background details. And formalist approach highlights how diction structure and symbolism shape meaning and deepen the paradoxical elements or paradoxical ending within the story of Henry's the gift of the Magi. Now, this analysis explores how language and structure create meaning, focusing on the irony, narrative voice, and plot symmetry. And also, new criticism is used in this paper to critique and examine how these textual elements work together to convey deeper themes. And for this purpose, um, the use of this new criticism or the application of new criticism would helps the researcher to know how these forms or structure generate meaning, particularly with the emphasis on formalist perspective and with the use of close reading as the primary method for analyzing the literary work of O. Henry. Now, for the theoretical background, we also have the first is that new criticism influential from 1930s to 1950s that treats the text as independent from author intent, history, or reader response. And according to Ransom, literature should not be studied as independent object with meaning derived from its internal structure rather than external context such as the author's life, intention, history, history and historical background, in which this highlights that in order to find the true meaning of the story, it is important to analyze the internal structure that was being used within the story itself. And um, Another theoretical background is that meaning comes from internal features, the tension, paradoxes, ironies, and unified structure. And key scholars like Ransom, Richards, Wimsatt, and Bridsley argue that only the words on the page matter for analysis, which basically means that through analyzing the structure or the internal structure, it would uncover the true meaning within each or that lies beyond each words. And in this story, irony and paradox acts as structural tools while the symbolism of hair and watch symbolizes material loss and spiritual gain. And close reading reveals how form turns a simple story into a universal statement. And for the objective of this paper aims to uncover the story of O. Henry's The Gift of the Magi using the new criticism under formalist approach, in which this paper aims to unfold and answer the following question of how close reading reveals how diction, imagery, and structure generate meanings in O. Henry's short story entitled The Gift of the Magi. And in what ways do Della's hair and Jim's watch function within the story's artistic structure to create paradox and thematic resolution? And for the last question is how do the story's literary devices, irony, paradox, diction work together to transform the mystic anecdote into a universal meditation on love? For methodology, the research design is that it applies the qualitative research design employing new criticism under formalistic approach, um, in which this theory focuses on close reading, analyzing the form, structure, dictions, symbols, tones, and other literary devices or elements that can be found within the text. And to analyze further the short story of O. Henry's The Gift of the Magi, its internal structure and elements used by the author itself. And the source of data is that the analysis um, intended to make this paper uses primary sources such as the short story of Henry titled The Gift of the Magi, and the secondary sources are included articles, journals, and books. And the data gathering procedure is that this study shall make use of the textual elements or analysis of the primary text as mentioned above, focusing on diction, symbolism, tone, paradoxes, irony, structure, and other literary devices to examine how form shapes the story. And with the use of secondary sources, it strengthens and support the analysis of this critic paper and also of formal features. Now, for the result in discussion, in terms of close reading of diction, imagery, and symbolism of the gift of the Magi, as what was the first objective um, of represent is that to know how these close reading of diction, imagery, and symbolism creates or generate meaning to the story. So for the form of literary elements, we have here the diction, imagery, and structure. And the cause source in the text is that the use of diction, simple, emotionally charged of language that builds intimacy and highlights the couple's poverty yet devotion. And for the supporting textual evidence, as listed, life is made up of sobs, sniffles, and smiles, with sniffles predominating. And for the imagery, with the use of vivid description of Della's hair and Jim's watch, it reinforces the symbolic weight of their sacrifices, in which um, Della had to sell her um, hair hair and saving penny so that she could give Jim a gift, a chain, as a Christmas present. The same with Jim. Jim sell her watch to buy Dallas a new comb for her hair. For the structure, it is compact and symmetrical plot in which it ensures unity and closure, intensifying the paradoxical resolution. And supporting textual evidence is that she had been saving every penny she could for months with her hair falling down like a cascade of brown waters. Now, for the next result, symbolism of Della's hair and Jim's watch. The form of symbolism, hair and watch, and also the interplay of both gifts rendered useless. In hair of Della has sells her hair to buy Jim's a gift, and meanwhile for Jim, he sells his watch to buy Della's a gift. And the impact of those symbolism is that it symbolizes Della's identity and sacrifice, showing that devotion beyond material values. And for Jim, it symbolizes the watch symbolizes heritage and pride. But for love, he surrendered it for to buy Dallas a gift. And the supporting textual evidence is that she had to sold her hair to buy him a chain for his watch, in the perspective of Della. And for Jim, he sold his watch to buy her combs. And for the interplay of these two, um, and supporting textual evidence of all who gave gifts, these two were the wisest, according to the narration of the narrator. And for the last result on discussion, the use of literary devices that create thematic resolution, in which the use of irony, paradox, and tone um, elevated and build the connections within the story, in which in the irony, cause and source in the text, gift exchange but rendered useless, in which it highlights that a sacrificial love and paradoxical wisdom um, could elevate the narrative, and with the use of paradox, the loss becomes the gain, into that um, creates universal meditation on love and devotion. And for the tone, it is tender, soft, humorous narration in which it guides or leads the readers towards empathy, softening irony rather than to pity. And for the supporting textual evidence, for irony, she had sold her hair, he had sold his watch. And for the paradox, they are the Magi. And for the tone, life is made up of sobs, sniffles, and smiles. Now, for the conclusion, um, the use of new criticism as a close reading, diction, imagery, and structure create artistic unity and highlights the paradox of sacrifice. That with the use of symbolism like hair and watch shows that true love means sacrifice, surrender, and that useless gift prove wisdom and selflessness. And with the use also of literary elements or devices, it builds or elevated the story from a domestic tale to a universal meditation on love and devotion. And for the analysis, meaning can be found within the text itself, separating or without relying on the author intent or its history. And analyzing the form or the structure and elements would help or guide readers appreciate the aesthetic and the unique style of writing of the author and thematic value of literature. Now, for the recommendation of this study, in future studies, they could apply this new criticism to other works, not just for O. Henry's, but to other remarkable authors to compare how ironies and paradoxes functions across the story in order to deepening the understanding of authors' literary styles. And with the incorporation or of this type of approach, the formalist approach, um, analysis for educator must is a must to train students in close reading, emphasizes how this diction, imagery, symbolism, and structure as a tool for interpretation, um, um, how is the usage of these elements elevated or build the story, in which with that it encourages students to explore the symbols found in their chosen stories, and it always also help them to think critically of what was the reason behind each words or the structure of the story. And comparing the story of the Magi, or the gift of the Magi with other literary texts, it applies different techniques, device, symbols, and elements would help or allow readers to appreciate every details found within the story, and also to appreciate the aesthetic or unique way of author's writing or the style of writing of an author. And that would be all. Thank you. And for the references, um, these are my references from my critic paper.